said probably not, and 0 definitely not. So it was good to see that there was a lot of positive outcome on this one. And then Janine, you can move us to the next slide. I want to say, just generally speaking, we didn't get a lot of negative feedback about the project itself, although we did get a lot of really good input from the community about some specifics they wanted to see if the bridge was going to be built. So it was really helpful. I would say overall, though, we did hear a lot of comments in support of the project. So I just thought I would share a few of those. The first one is that this bridge will be an extraordinary addition to the West Side Trail system. Community member also shared that a bridge over 26 from 143rd to Beaverton could be a literal lifesaver. And another community member shared that this would be a great throwaway for kids who attend Sunset High School and live on the south side of 26. So really appreciate those comments. Not only did those comments really help inform the project, but they also helped us know kind of where we're on the right track. So as Scott moves through his slides, you'll also see some tie-in there where we heard some community input and how we're responding in the project. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I am excited to turn it over to Scott. So Scott, I will let you take the virtual floor.
Great, thank you, Liana. And I think Janine is driving, so Janine, you could go to the next slide. And before I get into the heart of our presentation with the update about the project and the alternatives we're looking at, I want to add that at Jacobs, and I'm the consultant team project manager with Jacobs, we incorporate what we call a culture of caring moment into meetings. And so mine today is related to the pandemic that I know we are all getting very tired of, and encouraged that there are vaccines slowly rolling out. My wife, who works in the healthcare profession, was able to get her second vaccine on Saturday. And the reason I'm mentioning this is any of you who may be eligible or have loved ones, friends, elderly, higher risk people who might be eligible but may need assistance to try to access the vaccine, I highly encourage you to do that. We want as many people getting the vaccine as possible. And I should also add that at least for the second vaccine, my wife and a number of her colleagues felt very sick. So not as sick as most people who experience symptoms with COVID-19. But when you do get a vaccine, I highly recommend that you plan for some resting time to let your body recover. And the other reason that my culture of caring moment relates to bridge project is that she happened to be getting her vaccine on Saturday morning when a new bicycle pedestrian bridge was going in Northwest Portland, the Flanders Street crossing, and I was actually going to go check that out. And it went in so quickly and smoothly that by the time I would have been able to go over there, it was already done. If we have time, Robbie might be able to talk a little bit more about that later. So the overall getting to the project and this exciting point where we are, where it's timely to get input, questions, feedback from the community. I would say an overarching theme with the challenge of this project is what we call threading the needle. This is a view to the north from the south part of the corridor, and it looks pretty green, looks pretty open, but you might see those tall electrical utility lines. And then if you look more carefully, you might see, it looks like some vegetation. Well, there's some wetland area, and actually, sorry, this is looking from north to south, I should say. And so we know that there are a number of challenges. We're dealing in a Bonneville Power Administration, BPA-owned corridor where they lease utilities to Portland General Electric, PGE, for lines on the west side. There are underground utilities, including fiber optics and a high-pressure gas line. And yes, there are wetlands and then some topographic challenges. So we know that there are challenges that really limit the options horizontally and vertically, and that's what we're here to talk about, is the options that we're looking at both for the trail alignment, the bridge crossing over Highway 26, and structures coming down to meet the grade of the trail on both sides. You can go to the next slide. So today we're talking about trail and bridge alignment alternatives. And while I'm going to present this, I'm also going to call on my backup team with Sharon Dalio with Tool Design and Robbie Coombs, our bridge lead with Jacobs. And go ahead to the next one. So thanks to our work from our engineers and other consultants who have mapped the constraints, including survey work, wetland delineation, and then our designers for trail and bridge, and working closely with THPRD, we've gone through quite a bit of detailed iterations to get to some options that we're here to talk about this afternoon. This is showing both options that we're calling option 1 and option 2. So option 1 is more in the orange, and option 2 is in the more pink or fuchsia color. The black dots are electrical transmission towers. I should note that north is to the right. So this is a north-south corridor that just is mapped in landscape orientation there. So on the south end, the project goes from Northwest Greenbrier Parkway, crosses over Highway 26, would come to grade sort of in the middle of that image at Columbia Way, and then end up on the north end with a new access point at Northwest Cornell Road. As I mentioned, we've got a relatively large wetland area on the north side of Highway 26. And part of that encroaches into the BPA right-of-way that we are looking at. So the wetland itself has been delineated, and that's shown in blue. There's a 50-foot wetland buffer that is shown in green. And then it's probably maybe too light to see, but there are very light property lines on there as well. So I'll get into the details of the alignments, but in short, the biggest difference between options 1 and 2 is how they each cross Highway 26. Option 1 is more of a straight north-south crossing, and that would require a little bit more, or that would impact wetland area slightly more than option 2. And then there are variations with how these options would come down to meet grade between the north side of Highway 26 and Columbia Way. And while it doesn't show on this photo, there are also a couple of options north of Columbia Way. Immediately north of Columbia Way, the lay of the land slopes up quite a bit, and there would need to be some cut to meet acceptable grade. So one option shows a short distance of nearly 8% grade, which could be done. And then another option that we'll show on the profile view shows a more moderate grade of less than 5%. At the right side of this slide, so at the north end, there are also a couple of design options that we're looking at. One would be a slightly longer pathway, but would meet Northwest Cornell Way or Northwest Cornell Road at more perpendicular alignment that would allow a little bit better visibility of trail users for drivers. The other fuchsia route would be a little bit shorter and would connect with Cornell Road at a skewed angle. So that's sort of an overview of the two options. And Janine, if you go to the next slide, then we'll talk about a little bit more about option 1. And I should note that the variations I talked about north of, there may be some refinement we can look at north of Highway 26 and also north of Columbia Way, but we just have these intact as options. So trail alignment 1, we're looking at the area on top, the plan view, that is the really looking at the crossing over Highway 26, and this is all generally up on structure, and it's we'll get into that detail, but we're we're looking at elevating the roadway from grade on the south end, and it would be up on MSE retained fill walls, and then up on a prefabricated steel truss structure crossing over Highway 26, and then ramping down that whole area going over the wetland and wetland buffer area would all be structure as well. So when we originally were looking at this project, I didn't realize at least how much structure we were talking about, and that would all be on elevated steel girdered structure and with design that minimizes the impact to the wetland areas with a minimal number of footings and locations of footings. The profile view, you can see that we try to maintain reasonable grades. We're really trying to meet ADA accessibility in terms of grades, which limits the amount, the distance that we can have grades higher than 5%. So approaching the bridge crossing over Highway 26, we're looking at just under 5% grades. We also have to have the bottom of the structure at least 17 feet and 4 inches above the highway grade. And so this exaggerated profile is showing that over Highway 26, sort of on the left side of the that profile view on the bottom, that the elevation of the structure would go over Highway 26. And Robbie got some information from bridge fabricators, and I'll get into it for option 2, but option 1 has a vertical curve on the bridge that would cross over Highway 26, whereas option 2 has a horizontal curve, and so it's more of a flatter profile crossing over there. And then, as I noted before, on the north side of Columbia Way, this option is showing a steeper grade for trail users approaching Columbia Way at almost 8% for a relatively short distance, and then it flattens out. And the other option shows a little bit less of a grade. I don't know if anyone wants me to pause there, if there are any questions or comments. If not, we can go to option 2. All right, as I mentioned before, the differences between options 1 and option 2 are efforts to try to avoid or minimize wetland impacts. So for option 2, this resulted in a curved bridge over Highway 26. And the main reason for that curve is because I mentioned earlier with a number of the challenges that we're dealing with. There's one that you can't see on this very well, but there's an underground high pressure gas line that runs underneath Highway 26, and it's within the BPA corridor on the east side. To have a more straight bridge would require a footing that goes right too close to that gas line, and so we need to avoid that. The curvature is a pretty much uniform curve that can be that could be prefabricated, as we got information from a bridge manufacturer. And so this option has slightly less wetland impacts, and we've got another slide upcoming that shows the differences there. On the profile view, this is showing that there's more of a flat grade. So the curve is horizontal, but at the profile view at the bottom, it's a little more flat grade crossing over Highway 26. And then this option shows that, again, just under 5% grades approaching the highway with the same types of structural supports that I mentioned earlier for option 1. So a retained fill with MSE walls on the south side where the grade starts elevating, and then the steel truss bridge, a curved truss bridge over the highway, and steel girder structure that ramps down across the stream area of the wetland, where it then gets back to grade just south of Columbia Way, and then elevates on a on an at grade, but a cut area to be able to attain grades that would be under 5% on the north side. And again, these when we are refining these to a preferred alternative, we'll get to an optimal alignment and grade on that north side. So now that I've given this overview of those options, any questions or comments? All right.
I have one clarifying question, Scott.
Sure.
You mentioned the gas line, but you seem to only is a consideration for option 2. Was that what I heard?
Thanks, Lake. No, it's a consideration. It was a consideration for developing both of these. When we were developing option 1, the one that goes straight across the highway, that's far enough away from that gas line, and so that would the foundation in the middle of Highway 26, which an important point that I didn't mention. So both of these options would have 2 spans. So there would be a median support bent or column in the middle of Highway 26. So that's the key. There's a large concrete and steel foundation that needs to go underground, and it needs to be at least 10 feet away from, as I understand it, from that high pressure gas line. So both options would avoid it, but in order to have that option 2, that would need to swing to the east of it.
And Scott, this is Robbie. I'll add on to that a little bit too. The curved option 2, also gets the majority of the bridge, the truss structure, out from underneath the power lines. The second support that's in the middle of the highway and the third support that's on the north side of Highway 26 would both be out from underneath the power line. So it gives us a little bit of a different option for constructability. The first option is actually straight underneath the power lines and would require a little bit more of a bridge launch type of scenario, which is similar to what was just done over 405 this weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. And from the plan view, you can this shows the solid line would be the actual structure over Highway 26, and sort of the ends of that solid lines would be where those foundations would be, plus the foundation in the middle there, middle of the highway. All right, we move on to the next one, unless there's another.
Scott, can I jump in? Can you hear me okay?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Jean Seneschal-Biggs. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager at City of Beaverton. And this is my first meeting of this group. I think you've met once before maybe. So I'm a little bit sort of jumping in the middle of things, but I guess what's running through my brain as I'm looking at these is more of my questions are more around kind of what's the vision and goals for the project, and how does that tie into what we're seeing here on screen for the alignment? Maybe we'll get to it as you keep going on, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, how are we going to evaluate these, and how does it relate back to some bigger vision and all that? Thanks.
Do you want to take a shot at that, Janine?
I'll start out. Yes, Jean, part of the reason we wanted to do this phase, a preliminary design phase, is because we do have all these constraints. It really posed the question, can we put a bridge in here? And if so, what type of bridge? And we'll get to this question from the community, which aesthetics has been a question all along. I remember before we put the RFP out, I met with a number of consultants, and I would get the question, is this about functionality and cost or aesthetics? And my answer was yes. So as far as do we have a set of criteria, really it's the constraints of the site. Looking for, as Robbie was alluding to, bridges, we'd like something that we can drop in, so something that's constructed off-site, looking what can be put in here, and then balancing this desire to control costs. And my guess, and I'm not an engineer, but just working with Shelley O'Lear from the county on several grant applications, we're probably north of 15 million. So how do we balance getting something that meets ADA, that fits within all these constraints, but yet we still can incorporate some sort of aesthetics and art. And it's really looking at not only the constraints, but one of those constraints is the property line, and needing to talk to the property owners, because this option 2 does impact the corner of one of the private property owners.
That helps explain that this is really more feasibility than to just explore some ideas rather than make specific decisions at this point.
We will be choosing an alignment and an option, because the other outcome that we need from this project, and Jean, you know this as well as any of us, is that it is likely something of this magnitude will need federal funding. So we need to have a good handle on the costs. So we do need to ultimately pick something so that Robbie and his team can go forward with the cost estimating, and we can pursue funding for construction.
And overall, Jean, I would say that I know THPRD can probably provide you access to the initial presentation. We've also got some other documentation, but just high level, as you probably know, this is a key link within the longer West Side Trail, and understandably one of the more challenging, but also a link that we anticipate will receive get a lot of use even before other segments are completed. So it's timely to be doing this feasibility study and getting to a recommendation for a feasible alternative that can go forward and secure more funding to get designed and constructed.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And Jean, I'm happy to have a conversation offline with you, and you bring a wealth of knowledge. So if you have input, let's talk.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, I'll let you guys keep going. Thanks.
Great, thank you. You can go to the next slide, I think, and thanks for pointing out, Janine, also that hits the alignment we have. Next, a private property, and the other option 1 would stay within the BPA right of way. This gives some general parameters differences between the 2 alternatives. So as you may have been able to tell from those previous exhibits, the bridge over Highway 26 is a little bit shorter under option 1 with the straight, at least straight from the bird's eye view versus curve for option 2. The elevated ramps on the north side of the highway, the way we've developed them, option 2 is again slightly longer than option 1. The retaining wall, we essentially have the same design alignment on the south side of Highway 26, so similar length of retaining walls, and then the rest of the trail. 1,570 feet for option 1, 1,580 feet. So very similar for options 1 and 2. And overall, not too much difference, but option 2 overall length of that would be a little bit more. And I use the term MSE before this exhibit. This rendering that Tool developed shows a view from the south looking north, so south of the highway, as the trail elevates and approaches the bridge over Highway 26. And the sort of light brown, gray colored block walls, that's MSE wall. So you could go to the next one. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail on design considerations. This is a Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District slide showing the longer West Side Trail, and this short but important link in blue. As we mentioned, it's an integral part of the trail, which will one day, it's planned to extend from the Tualatin River to the Willamette River. It connects to adjacent trail systems that have been completed and to the broader transportation system. So that's connectivity that we know is important to the region and community. Go to the next one. One of the important elements that we'll be integrating into the design as we go forward into a preferred alternative is we know that there are standard signs that Metro and other agencies use, Twilton Hills Parks and Recreation District uses for wayfinding. And so the signs on the left, the two on the left, are signs that actually be at a trail entrance or at trails for directions where there are crossings. And then the sign on the right is Manual for Urban Traffic Control Devices sign that we've all seen around in different places. That's a directional sign that's on street, and so that would be approaching the trail access points from the streets, which are Northwest Greenbrier and Columbia Way and Northwest Cornell. And we'll resolve more of those details in the preferred alternative design. We'll go to the next one. So I mentioned the interface between the trail and the different roadways. We know that there are some potential conflict points where safety is going to be critical, visibility and signage, and to be able to alert people who are driving to the presence of bicyclists and pedestrians and the trail itself. The busiest roadway associated with the project that would cross is under Washington County jurisdiction, Northwest Cornell Road on the north end, and quite a bit of traffic on Cornell. We'll be resolving the more of the crossing details associated with the preferred alternative. So more to come, but we do know that there are going to be extra considerations approaching that crossing in particular. In the middle, the new trail would cross at grade at Columbia Way, which is a private access road in the Columbia Sportswear campus. So that's kind of in the middle of that. And the intersection design at Greenbrier Parkway, the connection, which is an industrial, relatively high traffic, a lot of truck traffic, and as others have pointed out, people tend to go pretty fast. It's a pretty wide road there. You can go to the next one. Any comments there?
Yeah, this is Blaine, Columbia Sportswear. Can you hear me?
Sure, yes.
Yep. So was there any consideration to, instead of crossing Cornell there, or adding an additional crossing there, but instead of going straight through behind Toso, which is the building to the right past Columbia Way, of diverting the trail out Columbia Way to Science Park Drive, and then up Science Park Drive to Columbia Way, or Cornell, excuse me, which there is already a crossing there.
There was some discussion of that in the planning, but decision essentially is that this would be a trail as part of a continuous regional trail to connect north and south, and so we're really focused on having a separated functional multi-use path, that's completely off street, except where we need to address crossings. Except where it crosses, right?
Okay.
But good question. We know that that Science Park Drive, for example, is, it's right between Columbia and Sunset High School, other businesses, and used by people walking and bicycling, and that will continue to be the case. And so there's opportunities for safe wayfinding and access connections between those different types of facilities.
Okay.
And Scott, if I can also just add with that when we looked at diverting the trail to Science Park Drive, that's pretty much fully built out. So we would not be able to separate fully, especially the bicycles. And with some of the freight traffic that comes in, we would be creating more points of conflict. So reducing the safety, actually, than keeping it completely off street.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, when we go to the next slide. This is also trail safety. This shows that the trail is going to be designed with a usable width of 12 feet, and this is the at-grade sections, and there would be a 2-foot gravel or graded shoulder on each side, and then 2 feet of clear, and then 10 feet of clearance minimum overhead. And it should note that we're designing it for bike movement with gentle curves, so as straight as possible, maybe some gentle curves to help slow people down, but not to restrict visibility between people walking and bicycling. And then the photo shows an example of where there's a center stripe to encourage people to stay on the right side as they're moving in that direction, and that's particularly around curves or areas where there's less sight distance for trail users.
Yeah, and Scott, just to add here that this is also partially in response to questions we got of whether we'd be separating the people on bicycles versus walkers or mobility devices. And while we can't do that, we are building in safety.
Thank you, yes. Go to the next one. Personal safety, safety and security has come up. The design considerations we're promoting visibility for trail users. We know that THPRD is considering lighting on this project and in other segments that they're designing and constructing. We know that the trail itself, we don't expect any noise issues, and then construction would need to meet noise ordinances. So including not being constructed near residences during normal quieter hours. We know that the trail will, as Tolton Hills Parks and Recreation District does for all their trails, will require maintenance. There will be opportunity at trailheads, for example, for trash pickup, and then the sign example here includes a park patrol security phone number. Looks like Lake has a question.
Yeah, I just quick question about signage, because this intertwined sign just reminded me. Has there been any discussions with about the signage around our intertwined signs? And we don't have to talk about it on at the meeting, but I know that it'll come up. Parks and Nature will probably ask about it, and I know at one point it was part of the RUFA sort of project scope, that not just for this project, but the intertwined signs were used on regional trails.
That is our practice, and actually Peter this morning was having conversations between Scott and our Nature and Trails maintenance folks to make sure that the signage not only is meeting intertwined, but also ADA requirements for legibility. And I want to mention on lighting, especially for those who might be watching this, we are looking at how it can be incorporated. This will still require conversations with BPA and also being mindful that sometimes we don't light trails because they go through natural areas. We do have the wetlands, so there's a lot to investigate. We're just making sure that whatever is chosen, we will be able to incorporate if allowed by all these other outside authorities.
There would also need to be work going forward with what Oregon Department of Transportation would approve for illumination crossing over Highway 26 for the structure. All right, why don't we keep going? As Janine mentioned, the project will comply with ADA standards, and so that's been a key consideration in our design development. As I mentioned earlier, the grades will be no steeper than 8%, and that's only for short distances. And generally, they'll be kept to no more than 5%. One of the survey respondents had a question about stairs. The project would not have any stairs, so it would all be accessible. The trail surfaces, I think this is important to mention. So the at-grade portions of the trail, and as it elevates up on fill, would be just like most of THPRD's trails are asphalt. And this just photo on the top shows an example. And thanks to Robbie, we are recommending an innovative treatment for the surfaces on the structure. At least north of Highway 26. We need to confirm whether or not the crossing over the highway itself still would need to be concrete, or if it could be this fiber reinforced polymer. And this photo provides an example of that from a bridge in Virginia, which is also a bicycle pedestrian bridge, which could have similar deck. So these are they're called RFP panels. They're 10-foot wide panels that are modular. They're cost effective. They're relatively good for maintenance, and they're good for durability and anti-slip. And if there is a problem with one, they can be switched out individually. Robbie, want to add anything more about the surfaces?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a unique product to be able to use. There's multiple manufacturers out there. The reason that we're leaning towards this is it is extremely lightweight when you compare it to concrete. The average weight for this is 10 pounds per square foot. So it allows us to go longer spans across the wetland area. We're looking anywhere between, our shortest span, I think, is looking like 76 feet, and we're going all the way up to 153 feet with these. So we can put some steel girders underneath and have the panel supported by steel girders, integrate railing into the sides, and then it's got a nice non-slip surface. We most recently actually used this on a project in Lake Tahoe, on the Nevada side of the lake, where we actually had an environmentally sensitive habitat that we could not impact. So this product allowed us to be able to put it in place without creating additional adverse impact.
And Lake had the question of if they're the panels are smooth for traveling over.
Yeah, so the panels actually have a non-slip surface on them, and the joints are actually smooth between the joints.
Yeah, and I believe this example in Virginia is identical to the width that we are proposing too.
Yeah, this one is very similar. It's a truss over a road, and then it's actually got a curved ramp on both sides of the truss in that case. The nice part about this too is we can actually integrate drainage into the deck panels as well, without having to add in additional scuppers or other things like that we would normally have to make room for.
All right. Why don't we keep going? I just want to make sure that we have enough time, including at the end. So this is showing some Atul Landscape Architects' great handiwork. This is a little bit larger view of the one shown earlier. So this shows a rendering of the approach from the south, which would be similar for both options. The orientation of the bridge crossing over Highway 26 would be different under option 2. So this is more indicative of option 1 that would go straight north-south. This is showing the elevation of the trail up on earth fill, and then it transitioning to a retained MSE wall fill, and just weaving the way between the power lines and keeping the structural supports away from the gas line. I also mentioned earlier there's a fiber optic line. We haven't gotten into this detail, but there is potential, if needed, to run that across the structure itself versus impacting it underground. And go to the next one.
This is Todd. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Has BPA looked into clearances yet? So in that photo, it looks like the transmission lines are the way they are today, but I'm wondering if has clearance been checked from top of bridge?
We are
lines yet?
going to, yeah, great question, Todd. We've been coordinating with BPA, and when we get to a recommended alignment, we're going to submit a preliminary land use agreement application to them to hopefully trigger a formal response or preliminary formal response. We're not in this feasibility phase seeking permits, but they have been, very collaborative along the way. And we recognize that it's going to be, that's very challenging with the current locations of the utility poles.
Yeah, I'm looking, I'm pretty sure that conflicts with our distribution line, so that would have to be relocated. And if BPA's line goes up, then both of ours that are parallel to the highway have to go up.
Yeah, elevated.
Yeah, it's all,
Yeah,
they're all connected. Well, not, they're all interrelated to each other clearance wise.
Yeah, so we are definitely going to need to engage you and BPA more closely going forward.
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. You can go to the next slide, Janine.
Scott, I think we've got a question from Stephen. Oh,
All right.
Sorry. Nope, he's signing off. Never mind.
Oh, okay.
Carry on.
I was just going to say, go ahead.
He does, he's signing off, but his only comment is to echo the previous comment about stubbing to Science Park Drive so that Sunset High School students who live south of the highway could more easily and directly access the high school. I suspect students will cross private property without such a stub, which may force property owners to fence their west property lines.
So I gather that that's just making sure there's a safe connection to the trail from Science Park Drive. I know there's the crossing of Science Park Drive at Columbia Way.
Yeah, I'd say he says stubbing, but it might be additional wayfinding, and we can work that out with him and through the design process.
Right.
Additional detail.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Blaine from Columbia. I also had the same concerns about foot traffic going down Columbia Way and then through our parking lot on the other side of the street to the school. So there is a gate that allows access to the field, and so I do have some concerns about that.
Okay, we can meet offline too with you too, Blaine.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Sure. Yeah, and speaking of Columbia Way and Columbia Sportswear, this is showing a rendering of the trail through one of Columbia's parking lots within the BPA corridor. And this the foreground is Columbia Way, and we're showing the trail slightly elevated, and so that's twofold. One, we know that we've got a grade challenge on the north side to reduce the grade, and so we're proposing slightly elevating the trail above the existing road grade. The other advantage of that would be that it increases visibility of trail users to people driving, and creates a little bit of a traffic calming in that area, that transition between buildings and parking areas for Columbia Sportswear. And this is showing for both options. We show the trail on the west side of the parking area with some barrier to separate people parking from the trail. Should also note that the lighting that's shown on the left side of that's existing. Those are existing light poles, and we'd have to, in the design, we need to make sure that we're not interfering with the foundations and electrical systems with those either. But this is our shot at that. It also shows a bollard. I was just going to add, it shows a bollard to keep people from driving onto the trail. And you can see that there for Behind the woman with the green helmet, there is the back of a stop sign. So trail users are directed to stop and look both ways. Go ahead.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, I thought I was on mute. I was making a note to myself about, because we'll be losing, it looks like, about 25 or so parking spaces for that. Okay. And
Yeah.
here, that high pressure gas line goes right, I believe it's to the right side of those lights, parking lot lights, through that grass area that you have.
Okay, yeah, and we're not proposing any, excavation that would interfere with the high pressure gas line, but yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
And I was going to say, Blaine, we can have conversations about impacts to parking and as soon as you want, or just let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll review this with our real estate director and just I'll let him drive that part of that conversation.
All right. Well, I don't think we have too many more to go, but so Janine mentioned aesthetics, and this is a couple different examples. I may ask Robbie to talk a little bit more. I talked a little bit about the type of structure crossing over Highway 26, and one of the main reasons that we're favoring a steel truss is because of the grades. The steel truss allows the trail itself to be as close to the highway elevation as possible and reducing the grades. And then there's also some constructability advantages of that. So maybe Robbie, you can just give us a little bit about the truss and then aesthetics. And I think we have one more slide that shows some art examples too.
Sure. So for this slide, I picked two different examples here to kind of showcase the two different alignments and then also some finish types that are available. The one on the left-hand side is a straight through truss. The floor for the truss is at the bottom of the section. Again, that gives us some ability to have a lower profile going over the highway since the bridge is supported from above instead of below. With the project we have, because we're going over a highway, we're going to have throw barriers and railing on the fence as well, and we'll go into some detail on that on the next slide. But this kind of gives you an idea on the left of what a straight truss would look like, and this one in this case has some white paint applied to it. There's a ton of different colors to be applied depending on the aesthetic direction of the project. The right-hand side shows a curved example. This is actually the Flight 93 National Memorial, and this bridge is unique in the sense that it's all a single curved bridge, and it's multiple spans. And this one is an orange in color. The orange color is from a natural patina on the steel. This is a weathering steel that forms a natural protective layer of rust on the surface. It is fairly popular for a lot of trail systems, but it's not something that we would have to implement in this case if aesthetics drive towards a colored option. So that kind of gives you an idea of paint versus the rusty orange look, and then straight versus curved.
You can go to the next one. Unless there's any questions there. Yeah, and this, thanks to Robbie, this is showing some different potential treatments. There's been some interest in opportunities to incorporate art, and again, that's more of a final design consideration. But maybe Robbie, you could add something about that too.
Sure. Yeah, the two slides on the right, the two photos on the right are actually the same bridge. This is in San Jose, California. It's a prefabricated truss, and it's got a wire mesh throw barrier along the truss because it goes over a highway. But what they implemented on this one was a little bit of artwork through panels that were attached to the bridge. The panels in this case are cherry blossoms and cherries due to the fact that there's a lot of cherry trees in this area that bloom every spring. So it's kind of a unique way to add artwork in. There's been different ways they've done it. This is one example. There's some bridges in San Jose as well that have done different fish and different flora and fauna of the area. One of the things I did want to point out that's kind of a technology that we're starting to see more often in bridge is the middle photo, and that's laser cut panels. they can either do it with water jets or laser cut, but basically you take a sheet of steel and you cut patterns into it to create an aesthetic, either through shadowing and light or through imagery itself. So that's another opportunity where we could have some aesthetics on bridge. And then the image on the left side, we talked a little bit about lighting on the approaches. Typical light standards would be pretty normal, but for the bridge, one of the things we've started to see a lot in pedestrian bridges is hidden lighting that's built into the railing. This allows us to be able to cast light down on the walking surface without creating too much light pollution and upsetting some of the wildlife in the area. So some of the options that we can carry forward, none of these are intended to be specific to this project, just kind of gives you a flavor of what's available out there.
And then Jean Seneschal-Biggs made an important point to make a distinction between the aesthetics in terms of the design and art integrated into the product. Jean, do you want to add anything about that?
I was just happily typing in the chat. No, it really is an important distinction. I think in our region, we've done quite a bit of work integrating art in transportation infrastructure. And there's many very talented artists that make this kind of work their professional niche. So I just think it's important to make that distinction, that it's really, if it's art, it's an artist created it and there's a concept behind it, as opposed to something that's more of an aesthetic treatment. So that's all. But lots of great examples in our region we can look to, and lots of experts we can reach out to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and I think we might be down to the last slide, which is oh no, we've got a couple more, I think. I mentioned this earlier, but one of the driving constraints behind the different options crossing over Highway 26 into the north is the wetlands area and the wetland buffer. And we had an initial coordination meeting with Clean Water Services, who has jurisdiction over habitat and wetlands areas and stormwater issues in Washington County, including this area. And so we know that we have also heard there's recognition that this area, which is a high number of or high amount, I should say, of invasive species, that there could be opportunity for some habitat restoration. Our biologists have informed me that it's not super high quality functional habitat, but we do recognize that it is a resource we want to try to preserve and avoid or minimize impacts to it. I should also add that the structure, one of the reasons that we need to be up on structure is not only to avoid the wetlands, but to have the trail stay out of floodwater, and also to not be a contributing element to increasing floods. So that we need to avoid impediments within the flood elevation. So I mentioned earlier that the structure system allows a minimum number of footings within the sensitive area, and that has gotten us to where the impacts to the wetlands and wetland buffers are relatively negligible. The biggest impact would be temporary from excavating area, but then that would be filled back in and replanted, reseeded. So this shows the difference between temporary and permanent or longer term impact between the two options. And so the temporary impact for option one within the wetland would actually be greater, and the permanent impact slightly greater to the, permanent impact slightly more for that too. And then the option two, permanent impact would be about a half, but not huge area. I mean, about 20 square feet, about 10 square feet for wetland and wetland buffer. Robbie, anything to add about that for footings?
Yeah, I guess the main important thing here is that we're using round columns in design right now so that we minimize our footprint, the permanent footprint, and then we're using buried foundations that are rectangular with micropiles on them so that we minimize noise impacts from driving piles, and we also minimize the overall foundation size at the end of the day.
And it looks like we've got some chat pop-ups too.
Yeah, the question coming in from Gene asks, does THPRD have a % for art requirement for this project? And will any anticipating funding sources have a % for art requirement?
That Doug Mankey, our general manager, and I were discussing that recently, that if we do get federal funding, would there be something like that? So it's something we're exploring, and I agree, knowing that early on is better.
All right.
And then Peter Lake also had a comment in there that hold on, things are moving. Consider using the avoid, minimize, and/or mitigate framework when discussing natural areas, working to avoid as much as possible and minimize and mitigate when there is impact. So,
yes, thank you, Lake. That's our lens we're using. And as I mentioned, we had an initial coordination meeting with Clean Water Services, and that was before we had the information that we do now. So we're going to loop back with them. And part of our scope is to develop a permitting strategy, so more clear identification of the permits that we'll need going forward.
And it looks like we have another, just a comment in the chat again from Jamie, if you'd like to take a look at that one. Just to keep in mind, if you are filling part of the wetland, you are effectively impacting additional wetland area, buffer area, and therefore would also need to be mitigated, even though it is not being filled directly.
Yeah, so I'll chime in on that a little bit. We are not doing any fill work in the wetland or the wetland buffer area. We're keeping the bridge up so that we're not introducing fill. We will have some small columns that we have to deal with in terms of impact areas, but we're trying to protect that area.
Yeah, the larger fill for the foundations would be underground, and then that above ground, hydric soil and planting would be replaced with wetland plants.
And then Lake has provided a comment that says, I realize you may already be doing this, but I like using 3 words: avoid, minimize, and mitigate.
Yeah, and we'll focus on that quite a bit.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to acknowledge that you guys are doing that when you're talking about it. I just was,
yeah,
it was like a thumbs up for you. Good.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. I think this is not the last slide because Liana has the last slide, but this is one that people might be interested in. So again, thanks to Sharon and Robbie and our design team. I should add that we are talking about preliminary options, but we know enough to at least have some planning level cost ranges. So there are a lot of variables, and that's why you're seeing about a $4 or so million range at this point. As Janine mentioned at the beginning, part of our charge is to develop a cost estimate. So while it's not going to be a construction level, it's still preliminary. It's going to be enough for our preferred alternative that we'll have an estimate that will be it will be more refined. So we know that there's some details to work through to get to a cost estimate that THPRD and partners can go forward with to seek, as Janine mentioned, may include the need for some federal funds going forward. In addition to avoiding minimizing impacts to wetlands, we also recognize that we're trying to avoid the need to acquire private property. The option 2 does skirt the edge of a private property Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District. We'll be working going forward right away in real estate. But that's another consideration if that option goes forward that we'll need to consider for getting through that acquisition and the costs associated with that. And then, of course, we're well aware of the existing utilities and the need to coordinate going forward with BPA and PGE and other utility providers. Robbie, do you want to talk a little bit about the constructability variances between these two options?
Sure. Yeah, the things that we're looking at mainly right now is that option 2 is a curved option. Option 2 is going to be a little bit more difficult to install, just due to the nature that a curved truss with that amount of curvature to it does have a tendency to want to turn in on itself as you're placing it, and there's going to be some hold downs that are needed for it as well. So it's a little bit more complicated to get that piece up in the air and on the supports, but it's feasible. The straight through option is a little bit different in the sense that we can actually build the thing off to the side and launch it into place through temporary supports and rollers, which would potentially allow us to use less of a crane option underneath the overhead lines, which is ideal for the site. So there's a little bit of nuances between the two items. The ramp structure for both is essentially the same, but the truss, the two different options have a little bit of their own complications.
And then I should note that the photo at the lower right is the brand new Flanders Bridge over 405 that was installed on Saturday.
Yeah, and that bridge was actually a launch. It was a hybrid launch. They actually built the entire bridge on the ground next to Deschutes, and it had been sitting there for a couple months while they put it all together. They used 2 cranes and a coordinated pick to slide it out over 405 on a single day closure on a Saturday.
All right, do we have other comments, questions?
Yeah, Jean popped in there. We haven't had a conversation as staff about the land use review process. Are you prepared to speak about this today or another time? And I think that's one another time, especially we have 14 minutes left. Would you agree, Scott?
Yeah, Jean, I'm happy to. We're happy to talk to you more offline. I mentioned that we've got the permit strategy memo, and so that includes all federal, state, local permits approvals. So meeting with you would be great in the near future.
Great. Okay. And there's other people in the community development department who we'd want you to connect with, who are part of that development review, land use review process, so we can make that happen. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
We have Shelley typing, I see. So what was the final usable bridge width, are you now assuming? So based on your feedback, I think our last presentation, we showed 10 foot, 14 feet, 12. I think that's what we showed.
It's a 12, yeah, the 12 foot walkway bikeway, but over the bridge and structures, we also need to account, and we'll get more into detail on this for the preferred, but we also need to account for drainage off of the structures, and so that takes a little bit of width along with the safety railing. So we would have a clear minimum width of 12 feet.
We're actually at 14 feet in the concept right now, clear, and then vertical clearance on the truss is 10 feet.
So I'm, as facilitator, I'm just going to check in. I want to ensure that we leave space for those community questions that came up that we've committed ourselves to respond to our stakeholders. I know you have lots of great questions, so I don't want to cut you off too soon. If you have further questions, I want to encourage you to continue to email those to us, and we can follow up one-on-one and hope to continue this conversation. I also want to take a moment to just mention a couple community outreach next steps. That we will have a Love Your Trail celebration event coming up on February 13th from 10 to 2 p.m. at Pioneer Park. And this will be an opportunity for community members to come out and to share their input about the project, ask questions, get some really accessible information. It should be a really fun Valentine's and Trails celebration for the whole family. So if you want to join us, please do. If you walk or bike to the event, it'll be a bike through, walk through event, taking pandemic measures very seriously. But if you do walk or bike, you get a free raffle ticket, additional raffle ticket for prizes. We'll also be opening a community survey with looking for more input in the coming months. And then we will also have more engagement opportunities throughout the year. So if you haven't already and you're interested, you can sign up for project updates on our webpage, where you can find more information on both that event and the upcoming community survey. I'll drop that information in the chat. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to close down this PowerPoint and turn it over to Peter, who's going to read a few of those community questions that we got for Janine to answer, and Scott will help support any answering.
So Liana, quickly before we go there, Jean had asked how we decided on the 14 feet. Are there constraints? Did you look at other project examples? So 14 feet is based on our regional trail standard and our trails functional plan of 12 feet plus the shoulders. And then also working with Jacobs on what we can have as pretty much, if I'm using the right terminology, a prefab versus having something custom made. So it's a combination. And as you can see throughout the PowerPoint, they have been looking at other bridges throughout the country.
And real quick, Blaine asks if we'll send out the presentation.
We can, absolutely.
Okay, and without further ado, I will pull up our community questions. So the first question we've got is about art and aesthetics with the bridge. Will art be included in bridge design? We know that there are going to be a lot of people seeing this bridge every day. Approximately 148,000 vehicles travel past through the bridge corridor each day. And with that level of visibility, we know that this is going to be a landmark and aesthetics will be really important. So we're trying to incorporate appropriate attention and funding for those. At the same time, what we've heard from community members thus far is that connectivity, accessibility, and traffic safety concerns are paramount with this project. And we have been asked from community members to make sure that we're spending project dollars prudently. So we want to honor those requests, and we're going to try to balance these things. You know, as Janine said before, when asked about if we want to, make it beautiful versus control for costs, the answer is yes. We want to do both. Want to make sure that.
If I can jump in, that we've spent most of the time today talking about the aesthetics of the bridge, but we will be looking also at incorporating art into the approaches. We've kicked around some ideas of how we might even engage the community. We will be looking for separate funding sources for art specifically. And then I also want to throw out that we have some commercial partners that are on this call that if Columbia or Nike had an interest in assisting with some of this, please talk to us. We have our foundation. We'd love to make a community partnership out of it.
And as we move forward here, we're going to look to refine those concepts down. So that's going to be through future community engagement. So please engage with us along the way, and that'll definitely help refine these ideas down. The next question we got was, when will trail connections north and the south of the bridge be developed? So our staff are currently looking into a funding plan for the West Side Trail connections to the north and south of the study area, of the bridge study area. And we're hoping that planning begins in the coming years. So the connections to the north and south have been outlined in Metro's West Side Trail Master Plan and our Trails Functional Plan, and we want to make sure that the bridge connects to those other sections. So from winter to spring of 2021, we're planning to submit funding requests for master planning of those connecting segments. And the intent is to align the development of those segments with the West Side Trail Bridge so that the bridge connects to its north and south segments once it is ready or within relative amount of time. A next question is, some community members have expressed that it's important to be cautious and balanced when spending funds. Or rather, that was a comment. THPRD will make every effort to balance bridge design options and future trail segments with a consideration for reasonably stewarding public funds. Public input from across the community as well as regulatory limitations will be critical in refining how to prioritize funds for the final bridge concept design. And we'll work with our grant specialists to seek funding for construction as well as specific funding for the inclusion of art in the project. And then last question that we received is, what will the bridge be used for? So as you all know, this is a significant link for the West Side Trail regionally, as the West Side Trail travels through the THPRD's Parks District all the way down to Tigard and exits the Parks District and heads towards Portland. The bridge will serve many purposes, but it'll primarily provide pedestrians, cyclists, and other active mode travelers with an opportunity to commute to and from school and places of work and access recreation areas. And community members have shared that it's especially valuable for them that the bridge will support both their active recreation and reaching additional recreation amenities within the Parks District. So we know that those are big priorities.
So, and I want to acknowledge that immediately before this meeting, we received another comment about potential prior historic use north and south of the highway. We need to talk to our consultants about that, and we will be getting back and providing additional information. So it looks like we're already starting to lose people. I just want to wrap up by thanking everyone for taking the time to be here at the second meeting, including our property owners, adjacent property owners, and agency stakeholders, and the community members who may be watching this. We appreciate your time and thoughtful comments. Your input really is helpful to this project, helping us understand the constraints, what's important to you, and how we can combine to come to success. So we look forward to continuing to work with you and move forward, and hopefully see you all out on February 13th.
Thank you so much, Janine. And we will post all the materials from this meeting on the webpage, the recording, the presentation, and the survey results. So thank you. Thank you, Janine, for that final word. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, and enjoy the snow.
Yeah, it just started snowing by me, so that's exciting.
It's starting to stick by me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming out today.
Take care, everyone. Bye.